Sinning. S-I-N-N-I-N-G. Sinning. No, not singing. Sing. How many of you enjoy committing sin? That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm asking. Well, everybody, hands went up, and then they're like, I don't know. I like to sing, but I don't like to sin. But listen, we are already off on the wrong foot. I can tell you right now. We are here this weekend to talk about escaping the stranglehold of sin. Whenever I say that, I want you to picture somebody having their hands wrapped around your throat, choking the life out of you and not letting you go, okay? That's what we're here to escape this weekend, is the stranglehold of sin. And we're off on the wrong foot because everybody started off by lying this morning. Every one of you just lied to me. When I said, do you enjoy sinning? Everybody thought I said singing, hands up. When you realize I said sinning, everybody's like, no, I don't enjoy sinning. I can prove to you that that was a lie. Two different ways. The most important way is going to be scripturally. And the second way is going to be common sense. All right, look at Hebrews 11:25 real quick. Somebody's reading from the King James. I didn't check the other translations, so I don't know how they translate. But somebody's using the King James Version. Read that for us when you get there. Hebrews 11:25. Anybody? Aaron, would you say that last part real loud? Moses had a choice. I can suffer affliction with God's people. That sounds fun, right? Suffer affliction. Or I can enjoy the pleasures of sin. Now granted, it's temporary, so Moses said, you know what? It's better to suffer earthly and then enjoy reward eternally than it is to enjoy earthly and then suffer condemnation eternally. But do not overlook the fact that the Bible itself tells us sin is pleasurable. But you don't even need the Bible to know that. I can prove it to you through common sense. If there was not some element of pleasure and enjoyment in sin, would you struggle with it? How many of you in here like boiled cabbage? Anybody like boiled cabbage? Yeah, there's some weirdos here. I knew there would be. All right. All the rest of us normal people, I'm talking to you, all right? Imagine we go into your house and we sit at your kitchen table and we put out in the middle of the kitchen table a big old bowl of boiled cabbage. That'd be a good breakfast, right? That's what we want for breakfast, a bowl of boiled cabbage. And I said to you, now listen, do not eat that cabbage. I don't care how good it smells, and boy, doesn't boiled cabbage smell good. I don't care how good it smells. I don't care how good it looks. Do not eat that boiled cabbage. Now, those of you who don't like cabbage, would it be hard for you to resist? That'd be super simple, right? Now, on the flip side of that, when I got here, Aaron gave me, he works for Little Debbie, he gave me a jumbo giant box of Little Debbie Swiss cake rolls. I love Little Debbie Swiss cake rolls. Anybody else in here like Little Debbie's? Okay. Now, I'm trying to figure out who the weirdos are and who the normal people are. It helps to know that right at the very beginning, okay? Now, those of you who don't like cabbage and do like Swiss cake rolls, now if I put that in the middle of the table, and let's say you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to eat healthy, isn't it amazing that whenever you're trying not to do something that you enjoy, how you see it everywhere that you look? And how that desire and that temptation gets stronger and stronger and stronger. You will never know how much you love Swiss cake rolls until you decide not to eat them because of diet or health. And then all of a sudden, they start calling your name in the middle of the night. When you're in the grocery store, it seems like every end cap is a special Little Debbie display, and you see it everywhere that you go. And to say no in that situation is a little bit tougher, isn't it? Now, I want you to go back with me. Let's start over again. I asked you, do you enjoy sin? Yes, we do. If we didn't, we wouldn't do it. I never eat boiled cabbage. You know why? I hate it. I think it's disgusting. There probably is nothing in this world I would like to eat less than boiled cabbage. It doesn't tempt me a bit. Just not interested in it. But there are a lot of other things that I do enjoy. Everybody that knows me knows that I love chocolate milkshakes more than anything in the world. I love chocolate milk. I don't drink coffee in the mornings. I get up and I'll make a glass of chocolate milk in the morning. I've been doing that probably since I was 6 years old. That's something I enjoy. And if somebody says, okay, look, I don't want you drinking that anymore. It's going to be hard because I like it. There are things about it that I like. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I don't want you to think that I'm saying that sin is good, because there's nothing farther from the truth. Don't forget that little tagline at the end of Hebrews 11:25. Moses had a decision. I can suffer reproach with the people of God. And in that case, he was turning his back on Egypt, being a prince of Egypt, the riches of Egypt, all of that. And he's now going to wander out in the wilderness for 40 years with these hard-headed, rebellious, constantly complaining and whining people who from time to time want to kill him. And he had a choice. He said, okay, I'm going to choose that path. Why? Because at the end of this path is fellowship with God and eternity with Him. And on this other side, there is pleasure. But it's just for a season. It's temporary. It's not going to last very long. And when it passes, it's over. And then I begin suffering forever. The reason that you and I struggle with sin is because there's an element of it that is pleasurable. That's why it's hard not to do it sometimes. We've got to be honest enough with ourselves to admit that if we're ever going to be able to break the stranglehold. If we're ever going to be able to escape sin, we've got to be honest enough to admit, yeah, you know what? There's something about it that I do like. That's why it's hard for me not to do it. Now, what we're going to do through the course of this day is we're going to dissect sin from so many different scriptural ways that we're going to be able to see it for what it really is, how it is that we're enticed, why it is that we struggle with it, what it really does to us, what the consequences of it are, and then ultimately how we can fully and freely escape from it. And then you can make your decision, all right, do I want to suffer reproach with the people of God, or do I want to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season? But it begins by having to be honest. You can lie to me, and not that I don't care at all, but it doesn't matter if you lie to me. I'll be gone in a few hours. We may or may not ever see each other again. But what really matters is you're going to be honest with yourself. Honest enough to look in the mirror and ask some really tough questions of yourself about your life and about what really matters to you. If you will do that, and I don't just mean do it today. Today may be the launching port for you. Today may be the start for you. But if you will honestly do that, you're going to be okay when it comes to your faith. Because you're going to look at yourself in the mirror and you're going to say, you know what? Here's the reality, and I don't like it, and I'm going to do something about it. Now, I want you to turn your Bibles with me to Romans chapter 7 for just a second. We're going to look at a couple of passages because I don't want you to feel like, I started off to get your attention, but I don't want you to feel like you're a horrible, terrible, worthless person. Yes, we do enjoy sin. That's why we struggle with it. Even though we know it's bad, even though we know it's wrong, even though we know it hurts God, it shames Christ, it brings reproach upon His church, we know all the bad stuff. But at the same time, if we're going to be honest, we know that we still enjoy doing it. And that's why we struggle with it. And I can tell you, and I don't think I'm the only person. And if I am, you know, I'm happy for you, but I think you probably can relate to me. It still bothers me that I do enjoy sin sometimes. And it's this, like this emotional tug of war. You want to tell you one of the reasons I love gospel meetings and VBS and lectureships and youth days and polishing the pulpit in church. The reason that I love spiritual events is because this is the one time when it's really not that hard for me to avoid sin. It's not too, it's almost like a break. You ever had to be in the hospital or you've been sick and you just can't get any rest while you're in the hospital? They come in about every 30 minutes and they're checking your blood pressure, your temperature, or this or that, and they just won't let you get any rest. And all you're thinking is, if I could just go to sleep, I could get some relief from this pain. I could at least, not be sitting here hurting constantly. If I could just get some relief. Well, that's what I feel like when I'm in a spiritual setting. It's like, okay, I get a little break. I can kind of at least catch my breath and recharge for a minute before I go back out there and get my brains beat in by Satan. Because he's doing a really good job out there. And what scares me is he's starting to do a really good job in here. He's always ruled this world. He's always been the God of this world. He's always been, in power and temptation. The world, I don't know that there's ever been a time when the world wasn't wicked. Except for maybe that little brief period, however long it was, between creation and when they listened to Satan and they ate of the fruit that God had forbidden. That's really the only time that the world has ever been not filled with evil. Isn't it interesting that one of the first things that you read after that is that a brother murders his own brother? So, I mean, the world has been evil. He has had his way with this world almost from the very beginning. But the scary thing is he started breaking through the doors, and now he's having a lot of success in the church because he's bringing the world in here with us. And to a great degree, we don't even realize it yet. In order for us to break free from the stranglehold of sin, first thing we're going to have to do is be honest enough to admit that we are in the stranglehold of sin, that it's got us. And then it's got us more than we'd like to admit. All right, look at Romans chapter 7 with me. Pretty impressive guy here, a guy that you wouldn't normally think of in these terms. That being the Apostle Paul. I think about me, I think about Paul, and I think if I could be him, I'd have it made. Probably not. I don't know who Paul looked at or looked up to as his spiritual heroes or whatever. I'm sure he did. But I know that when it was just him and God and him looking in the mirror, sometimes he didn't feel so great about himself. Look at Romans chapter 7. Pick up with me in verse number 15. Now, I'm going to be reading from the King James, and I'm going to give the paraphrase because I will admit that the King James language in these passages is a little tongue-tied. It's like you almost say, what in the world is he saying here? All right, but I'm going to read it. For that which I do, I allow not. For what I would, that do I not, but what I hate, that do I. Drop down to verse 19. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. All right, here's the paraphrase of this. Paul says, there are things that I know I should not be doing. And I find myself doing those things. There are things that as a disciple of Christ, I know I'm supposed to be doing. And then I realize that I'm not doing those things. Real quick, I can make us all feel bad. What is one of the first simple things that a Christian is supposed to do? This is like step one for a Christian. Go and teach others. You were converted so that you can convert other people. How many people have you brought to Christ in your life? Now, young people, I know you're going to think, well, I've only been a Christian 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. Let me pick on us older guys. I have been a Christian now for 25 years, almost 25 years. Next year will be 25 years. Some of you, maybe you've been Christians 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. In that 30-year time, how many people have you personally brought to Christ? Generally speaking, when you ask that question in a Bible class, about 90% of the people say no one, not any, none, zero. Now, I've asked that question in a lot of different places, a lot of different audiences, and the overwhelming majority of Christians have never even brought one person to Christ. And that's like our main job as Christians. Okay? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And you've heard that before, hadn't you? Chad will preach a sermon every now and then, I'm sure, on personal evangelism. And talk about how we need to reach the lost and how we need to do this and all that. We need to sit down, we need to talk to our neighbors and all that. And then we'll feel bad and we'll say, you know what, yeah, you're right, I should. And then as soon as we leave services, we start worrying about, well, what we're going to eat at Cracker Barrel today. And as soon as we go eat, we forget everything that's been said and we go right back to where we were and we don't do anything different. Until the next time somebody like me brings it up in a sermon and we start going, you know, I really am not doing a good job at that. And again, I'm not trying to make anybody feel, I'm not trying to beat you down and make you feel like you're terrible. I'm trying to point out, you know what, Paul struggled with that stuff too. Paul said, I look at my life and there's things that God wants me to do and I realize I'm not doing those things. And then I look at my life and I know there's things that God has drawn boundaries and said, don't do that. And I find myself keep going back and doing those things again. Now, what was his reaction? Drop down to verse 24. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Now, in the greater context, there's a real big theological thing going on here with Paul about the law of Moses and the law of Christ. But in the simplest sense, you've got Paul looking in the mirror all by himself. He's not surrounded by a crowd of thousands of people who think he's the greatest preacher they've ever heard. He's not sitting down and writing out all of these powerful, beautiful things that you and I look at and say, this is what's to govern our life. This is just Paul saying, you know what? I struggle with sin and it makes me feel terrible about myself. But this isn't anything new. I want you to look at another chapter 7. Turn way back in your Bible to Isaiah chapter 7. These problems and these struggles and these fears, none of this is new. Not to us, not to even the New Testament. This can go back even to the days when God used prophets to speak to the people of Israel. I'm sorry, I gave you chapter 7. Look at Isaiah chapter 6. Wouldn't it be cool to take a trip to heaven, like to visit? I mean, like, go take a tour of heaven, so to speak. Isaiah got to take a tour of heaven in Isaiah chapter 6. He has a vision in which he goes up into the throne room of heaven, and this is what he sees. Verse 1 says, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. His train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphims. One had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he did fly. And one cried unto another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory. The post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Isaiah is standing in God's throne room, and he sees this majestic scene. These angels are flying, and they're chanting that God is holy, and the place is shaking, and he sees God in all of His glory sitting upon the throne. And Isaiah does not go, wow, this is amazing. Or Isaiah doesn't pinch himself and say, I can't believe that I'm actually here. You know what Isaiah does? The next verse says he falls down on his face and he says, woe is me. Isaiah says, I'm ready I do not want to be here. Woe is me. And the King James translates it this way, for I am undone. There's 2 possible ways that this word undone can be translated, and I'll be honest with you, there's good arguments for both, and I don't know which one it is. I'm not smart enough to figure it out. Neither one of them, I think, hurts the text at all. You can make up your own mind. One possibility is this, that undone means that all of the strength has been removed from him. I don't know if y'all, we live in a digital technology age. I don't think y'all play with physical toys much anymore, especially not those little plastic ones from Cracker Barrel. But I can remember when I was a kid, I loved going to Cracker Barrel. They had these little toys, and it was like a wooden paddle, and it had like a little plastic horse on it, and it was made out of little segments of plastic, and strung through those little plastic segments was a high-tension cord. And there were 2 little triggers on each side, and if you would squeeze one of those triggers, it would release the tension on that cord, and it would make that horse like drop down on one side. Or you could squeeze both of them together at the same time, and it removed all tension, and that little plastic horse would just collapse. And then you could let it go, and it'd pop right back up into place. And I loved playing with that when I was a kid. It's possible that's what this word undone means. That when Isaiah sees this, it's just like everything, he just drops. Another possible translation for this word undone would be the word naked. Undone is in his garment. You read a lot of times in the Bible about their robes, and they would be told to gird up their loins. Basically, wrap your robe up and tie it up real tight. And so it's possible that this word means that his garment has been undone. And Isaiah is saying, in essence, I'm standing here naked. Now, why in the world would he say something like that? I want you to think about how easy it is for you and I to pretend that we don't struggle with, and that we don't enjoy, and that we don't have a problem with sin. Really, all I have to do is take a shower, shave and put on some decent clothes, and walk into a church building with a Bible, and you will naturally assume that I'm a good Christian man. And I'll assume the same things about you. All we have to do is really put on some clothes that make us look godly, go to a place where religious people are, and we naturally assume, well, all our young people are good Christian people. And then we read in magazines and see things on the news that tell us statistically that, 3/4 of our young people leave the church when they go to college. That there's really no difference statistically between the church and the world when it comes to premarital sex. That about the same number of church kids are having sex outside of marriage as those that are in the world and who aren't Christians. But we just think that this stuff's not really happening. Why? Because we look the part. We look like Christians. And we go to Christian places. But then we can do and be anything else that we want in our own minds or in our own rooms or in other places, and nobody will know. Well, you know what? Isaiah could have done that as well. In fact, I would have think it would be really hard for Isaiah not to think highly of himself. Have you ever stopped to think about how hard it would be to be somebody like a pop star? Everybody tells you all the time how great you are. Everybody around you does anything you want. Everybody around you, nobody ever tells you no. In fact, people beg you and ask you, what can I do for you? What do you want? Isn't it weird that rich, famous people go to restaurants and they give them free meals? And they give them free stuff? They finally are in a position they can afford anything they want, and then now everybody wants to give them stuff. Can you imagine living every day of your life and nobody tells you no, and nobody tells you you're wrong, and everybody wants to be your friend, and everybody wants to be around you, and everybody wants to do you a favor? Can you imagine how hard it would be to remain grounded and not become some obnoxious idiot? Is it any wonder then that these young celebrities do so many dumb things? They've lost touch with reality. Imagine you're Isaiah, and you are arguably the most powerful person in all of Israel. Now I realize you got the high priest, and I realize you've got the king. He really runs the show. But who does the king turn to for advice? The great prophets. King is smart. Before he goes into battle, what would he do? He would go to the prophet and consult with him and say, consult with the Lord and tell me what the Lord's will is. To a great degree, the king did whatever the prophet told him God said he should do. At least the good kings did. Now you imagine you're Isaiah. You are the man. You are the one that the king listens to. Everybody else bows in fear of the king. The king comes to your house and says, hey, what do you think I ought to do? Imagine you're going around in the marketplace getting you some stuff for breakfast. Maybe you need some boiled cabbage or some Swiss cake rolls, and you're walking through the marketplace. And you notice mamas saying, do you know who that is? That's Isaiah. That's Isaiah. Go get his autograph. I don't know if they did that back then or not. I don't know if there were paparazzi in Old Testament times. Can you imagine being somebody of that power and that prestige? Do you think there would be a temptation to start thinking, I'm perfect. I got it all together. Everybody wants to be me. Everybody wants to be my friend. Everybody wants to know me. I'm not saying that Isaiah did. I'm just saying it would be in human nature. When you're in a position of this great prominence and prestige, it'd be hard for it not to go to your head. But I know one time that it didn't for sure, and that was right here in Isaiah 6, when Isaiah's standing in front of God. And he says, you know what? It's as if I'm standing here naked. I am a man of unclean lips, he says. And I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. Why? For my eyes have seen the glory of the Lord. Isaiah could have very easily gone out into the city and found somebody in the city and said, okay, here's me and here's this guy. I'm way better spiritually than this guy is. This guy's with harlots. This guy's a drunkard. This guy's a thief. I don't do any of that stuff. I'm a good guy. I don't struggle with sin. This guy's a sinner. There were people who did that in the New Testament, weren't they? What were they called? What were they called? What were the people who said, I don't have a problem like all these other people do? The Pharisees, right? Jesus had another word for them, though, didn't he? Hypocrites. Hypocrites. They called themselves Pharisees. Jesus said, no, what you are is a hypocrite. Because you look at others and you condemn them for their actions, but you don't think that you have sin in your own life. That makes you a hypocrite. Isaiah wasn't a hypocrite because he says, I'm not comparing myself to other people in Israel. I'm standing before the pure, innocent, holy God, and I see myself for what I really am, which is a man of unclean lips. And I'm around a bunch of people who are just like that as well. I think Isaiah is saying that this world has rubbed off on me more than I realize it has. We still need to have that moment where our eyes are open and we realize how much the world has rubbed off on us. We don't notice it because it's rubbed off on all of us for the most part. And you know what we usually do when we're around somebody that it hasn't rubbed off on as much? We usually attack them. Say they're weird, they're holy rollers, they're religious nuts. We start finding all the things that are wrong with them because they have a problem with the language we use or the clothes we wear, the places we go, or the music we listen to, or the things that we watch, and they don't participate in those things. And we start having a problem with them because they're not like us. And so we don't notice how much this world has rubbed off on us because it's rubbed off on most all of us. And we look at each other and go, well, I look like that guy, and I look like her, and they're doing the same things, so it's okay. Isaiah didn't do that because he's standing in front of God and he's looking at God and he's looking at himself and he's saying, you know what, now I see myself for what I really am. Because I see holiness and then I see this and it doesn't match that. And so he said, woe is me. A couple of months ago, we were traveling back to Tennessee, which is where we're from, and I had to stop in for gas. And okay, this is what I did. I pulled in the gas station. It wouldn't take my card, so I had to go inside and pay inside. I literally was in this gas station 30 seconds to 1 minute tops. However long it takes for them to swipe my card, say I need $60, swipe my card, sign the thing and walk out. 1 minute at the most. Walk out, pump my gas, get in the car. As soon as I get in the car, my wife and sons are like, oh, you stink. What is that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, you smell like cigarette smoke and chicken grease. And I'm like, what? And so I took my shirt and I was like, ooh, I do, I stink. I had gone into this store, they were smoking in the store, and they were frying chicken in the store. I was in there for 30 seconds, 60 seconds top, but just being in there that long, that stuff had already got in my clothes and you could smell it on me. Now, I didn't notice it in there. I didn't notice it out there pumping gas. It was when I got in there around some other people who didn't have all that in their life, didn't have all that on their clothes, and they could smell it and point it out. Then I noticed it. That's what Isaiah is having right now. He doesn't realize it. Because he's walking around in a world that is really corrupted and tainted by sin, and then he walks into God's presence, and God is like, something's wrong here. And Isaiah realizes, man, this world has rubbed off on me more than I realize. Now, the beautiful thing is God at this point steps in and he cleanses him of his sins. Oh, and coincidentally, by the way, guess what Isaiah says immediately after that? God says, who will go for us and whom shall we send? Isaiah says, ooh, me, pick me. Here am I, send me. As soon as Isaiah is cleansed of his sins, he wants to get out there and go help other people be cleansed of their sins as well, which is the mark of a follower of God. Now, here's how we got to close out. We need to look at James chapter 1 because we need to break down the specifics. Why do you and I struggle with it? Everything I've said, we already know that. Okay? We already know all that. Maybe what we don't understand is the mechanics of why do we do that. I am not a therapist. I have some good friends who are licensed professional therapists and counselors, and I love getting advice from them and wisdom from them. And it amazes me that the things that they can learn and how they can help people who are struggling with problems. And here's what's going on in their life. And they can sit down and they can talk and they can ask some questions and look at history and things like that. And they can show to them, well, you realize that when you're doing this, what you're trying to do is make up for this. Or this happened to you in your past and you never dealt with it. And you just let it go for years and years and years. And now this behavior today really is tied back to the fact that you never dealt with the fact that your dad never had anything to do with you. Or you never dealt with the fact that your mother, was physically abusive when you were a child. You just pushed all that down deep, and now those things are coming out. And it helps them to go through and see in their own lives, where do we get off and how do we need to go back and get back on track? Well, that's what James chapter 1 does for us. Why do you and I struggle so much with sin? We know it's bad. We know it's wrong. We know it'll cost us our soul. We know it's what put Jesus on the cross. We know all of that. So why in the world are you and I still struggling with it after all this time? Number one, we got to admit it's because we enjoy it. But let's break it down piece by piece here. Look at James chapter 1 and verse 13. First thing is, don't blame the wrong person. Let no man say, when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God. Now you got to understand, in this chapter, the word tempted is used two different ways, and it's used two different ways throughout the Bible. Sometimes the word is used to refer to a test that someone is being put through to prove them. Okay? You go through and you study your driver's manual and all that kind of stuff, but there comes a point where you have to take a test. They want to see, do you know what you think you know? Can you put it into practice in the real world? Can you actually do this? We know that you took your test and you know what all the signs are and the speed limits and the rules, but I want to put you behind the wheel and see, can you handle a car out on the road in the real world? It's a test. No, they're not trying to make you mess up. They're wanting to see if you're prepared. And sometimes the word temptation, it would be better translated as trial, because it refers to you being put to the test to see if you're prepared or if you're ready. And in the first part of this chapter, that's how the word is used. But the context is going to show us there's a different way the word is used here. And this is temptation in the sense of how you and I normally use it. And that is trying to get me to do something wrong. Let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and neither does he tempt any man. God never tries to get you to sin. Okay? One thing that you can go ahead and set aside and say, I don't have to worry about this. God never tries to get me to do something wrong. God is never going to say, okay, let's see if they will do the right thing in this situation or if they're going to sin. God never tries to get us to sin. He doesn't try to entice us to sin. So if I'm struggling with sin, it isn't God's fault. Second part, verse 14. However, every man, you know what that means? Every one of us. Those of us that like Swiss cake rolls and those of you weirdos that like boiled cabbage. Every one of us and everybody in between. Every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. I moved to Valdosta, Georgia from Pulaski, Tennessee. People fish in Pulaski, Tennessee. I've gone fishing in Pulaski, Tennessee. People in Valdosta, Georgia have a whole new level of crazy when it comes to fishing. I mean, this is not a joke, I have little old ladies at church walk up to me and talk to me about fishing. Okay? Normally back home, little old ladies would talk to me about ladies' Bible class or about food or something, but these literally have little old ladies come up and tell me about this 6-pound bass that she caught last night, okay? They're crazy about fishing. They know a lot about it that I don't know. I'm just not a good fisherman. My dad didn't take me fishing growing up. I just don't know a lot about it, but I do know enough to know this. If you're wanting to catch a particular type of fish, you use the type of bait that is something that fish is interested in eating. Now, when I was growing up, and I know you're going to laugh at me when I tell you this, but I grew up on Chicken Creek, okay? When I was growing up on Chicken Creek, my Uncle Ryan and I used to go fishing in Chicken Creek, and we used a cane pole and cheddar cheese to catch little bluegill fish. That's what we call them, bluegill. And they would bite that cheddar cheese. I think those poor things were just so starved for anything, you could have dropped the hook in there, and they'd have been happy to eat the hook. But I've tried that in other places before. Doesn't really work. I don't think you're going to catch many bass with cheddar cheese. All right? I know that whenever we would go fishing in the pond and we were going to catch catfish, the few times that my dad took me, we would usually go to the store and we'd buy a big thing of chicken liver. And we'd put chicken liver because he said, look, catfish like stuff that's stinky and nasty, stuff that really stands out in that murky, dirty, nasty water. You need something that's going to get their attention. Put some chicken liver on it. But again, I don't think that chicken liver would be good to catch every kind of fish. Maybe that kind, but not every kind. If you're going to catch a specific type of fish, you're going to need to use the bait that is going to be appealing to that fish. Or they're just going to swim by and ignore it. Same thing. If I wanted to try to get you to eat something and I put that bowl of cabbage out in front of most of you, you wouldn't care. You just walk right by it. But if I put something that you really liked, it might stop you in your tracks. Satan knows that too. And you know what he knows? What will tempt a 60-year-old man is not necessarily the same thing that's going to be a temptation to a 14-year-old girl. And so you know what he's going to do? He's going to use the bait that is specific to your weaknesses. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away. What do you think he's being drawn away from? God. That righteous path. Trying to get us away from it. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away of what? Of his own lust and enticed. Every time you find yourself struggling with sin, I want you to backtrack a couple steps and you're going to find Satan there with his fishing pole. And whatever that lust, whatever that weakness is, whatever that temptation you have, and it probably was dangling right in front of your face before that. And he got you to nibble at it at first. That's where we see how far we can go without actually sinning. That's where we start asking questions about our clothes, how short's too short, how tight's too tight, how far, in dating, how far is too far. We start asking these questions, and Satan's laughing because he's sitting there watching that float bob because he knows we're nibbling. We're nibbling. And it's not going to be very long before finally we take a bite. And then he's got a sin, he says. At first, it draws us away and we're enticed. But then look what happens, verse number 15. Then, when lust has conceived, it brings forth sin. Here's the problem. When we start to give in to our temptations, when we start to follow after those lustful desires, when they get our attention and we start going with them, it's just a matter of time before it comes into full fruition of sin. And he uses a word here that literally refers to a woman conceiving a child. A man and woman can come together physically, and she can conceive a child. And here's the interesting thing. For a long time, nobody will even know that she's conceived a child. In fact, for a while, she may not even know she's conceived a child. I know it's different from one woman to the next, but there have been women who have actually gone full term and didn't even know they were pregnant. Now, I don't know how that happens, but it does happen. But even in more normal situations, usually a woman will go a month or 6 weeks or 2 months before she even knows she's pregnant. She doesn't even know that a child has been conceived within her. There may come a time then when she knows, but nobody else knows. Why? Because she hasn't started, what's the word that we use? She hasn't started to show yet, right? No, there's a life growing inside her. She may or may not know about it. No one else may or may not know about it. But that life is in there and that life is growing. Now, you let that life go long enough, and what's going to happen eventually? She's going to start to show. People are going to start to know. And at the very least, at some point, she's going to deliver that child. And then everybody's going to know. There's no hiding it then. It's out there. And that's the perfect parallel that James uses for how sin works. It starts with lust in our own hearts. And you may not even realize that that's where you are right now. You may not even realize that the bait's been dangled. And you may even go ahead and engage, and that lust may conceive and become sin in your heart, and you may not even realize it. Or even when you do realize it, it might be a secret to everybody else. Nobody else even has a clue that you are in sin right now. But I guarantee you, you give it enough time. James says, then that sin, when it's finished, literally gives birth to death. It's kind of what we think of as an oxymoron. It sounds like something that contradicts itself. Giving birth to death. He says that's what happens when sin is conceived in your heart. It grows and it grows and it grows, and eventually it's going to show, eventually it's going to come out. Everybody in this room knows of people that have fallen from grace that we have been dumbfounded when it's happened. It might be an elder or a preacher or one of your Sunday school teachers, or it might be one of your parents or some kid in the youth group that you thought was just so great. And you had no idea until some terrible something comes out and it's public and it's embarrassing and it's shameful, and we're all just standing there going, I can't believe whatever it is. When in reality, if we've been able to rewind the clock, it started a long time ago when they were drawn away that first time of their own, whatever it was that appealed to them. And they yielded, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew. And it may have been secret for decades. Then eventually, it gives birth to what? To death. When it comes to sin, we've got to be honest enough to admit we struggle with it because we enjoy it. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to learn to do is learn not to enjoy it. And that's not going to be easy. The only way we're going to be able to do that is we're going to have to be able to see it for what it really is. That's what the rest of the day is going to be devoted to in part, is helping us see sin for what it really is. And helping us to understand right off the bat that it always starts with baby steps. It starts with the thought, it starts with the look, it starts with the sample, and then it grows and it grows and grows until it consumes us, until ultimately it destroys us. That's how the devil goes fishing for souls. And everybody in this room right now is at various stages of that cycle. I hope today will help you figure out where that is. And most importantly, I hope by the end of the day, it'll help you figure out what you need to do. I really appreciate y'all's attention. Do we have boiled cabbage at lunch today, by the way?
Asparagus pizza.
Asparagus pizza, even better. Thank y'all for your time and attention. I appreciate y'all's participation in this. I'm really looking forward to being here and studying this with you guys. It's something that everybody in this room, from the elders to the preachers to the kids and the parents, everybody in this room, we need to be reminded of this stuff, because sin has got a stranglehold on us right now, and it's starting to choke out the church as well. We got to do something about it. Appreciate y'all's time.